world's biggest drug cartels has been arrested in Texas.
To announce a landmark victory for the Department of Justice, our law enforcement partners, and the United States of America. As you've heard, drug kingpin Ismael Zambada Garcia, also known as El Mayo, has confessed to a lifetime of crime in service to the Sinaloa Cartel.
Ismael El Mayo Zambada, cofundador del Cartel de Sinaloa.
The most prolific drug trafficker in modern history, El Mayo. For more than 30 years, El Mayo ruled through raw terror. Under his command, the Sinaloa Cartel became a machine of brutality and greed.
The empire flooded the United States and the world with deadly drugs, earned billions of dollars in profits, and then laundered those billions through the financial system.
3 days ago, a judge in Brooklyn looked at a 76-year-old man and handed him two numbers, life and $15 billion. The life sentence was for Ismael Zambada Garcia, known to the world as El Mayo, the co-founder of the Sinaloa Cartel, the man who built one of the most powerful criminal organizations in human history and ran it for nearly 4 decades without ever being caught. The $15 billion was the forfeiture order, the largest criminal forfeiture judgment in the history of the United States. $15 billion in drug trafficking profits that the U.S. government says El Mayo generated over his career. But here is the sentence that nobody put in the headline. Federal prosecutors told the court they have not been able to identify or recover any assets toward that $15 billion judgment. Not a dollar, not a property, not a bank account, nothing. And this is not the first time this has happened. When El Chapo was convicted in 2019.
The Mexican drug lord nicknamed El Chapo will spend the rest of his life behind bars in a U.S. prison. A federal judge handed down the life sentence in Brooklyn today. Guzman was convicted on multiple counts in an industrial-sized drug smuggling operation back in February.
The court ordered him to forfeit $12.6 billion. The government recovered almost nothing from that judgment either. Two of the largest criminal forfeiture orders in American history. Two men who built the same organization. 2 times the government walked away with essentially zero. That pattern does not happen by accident. It happens because someone built a financial system specifically designed to make sure it would. 40 years. Tens of millions of kilograms of cocaine, heroin, methamphetamine, and fentanyl flooding into American communities. $15 billion in profits. And the most sophisticated law enforcement apparatus on earth cannot find where the money went. Today we are going to answer the question the news did not ask. Where is the $15 billion? How does a criminal empire of that scale actually make money, move it, hide it, and make it disappear so completely that even after the man at the top pleads guilty in open court, the government still cannot find it? Let's start with the man himself, because to understand the money, you have to understand how unusual El Mayo was. Most people have heard of El Chapo, Joaquin Guzman, the man with the dramatic escapes, the Rolling Stone interview, the Netflix series. El Chapo was the face of the Sinaloa Cartel, the celebrity. The one who ended up in a maximum security prison in 2019. El Mayo was the opposite. He was the shadow. While El Chapo was getting famous, El Mayo was running the business. He avoided the spotlight so completely that for decades, most Americans had never heard his name. He never gave interviews. He never courted attention. He lived quietly in the mountains of Sinaloa and managed the cartel's finances, logistics, and political relationships with the kind of discipline most Fortune 500 CEOs could not match. According to the U.S. Treasury Department, he was linked to money laundering schemes involving what appeared to be legitimate government contracts in Mexico. He was not just a drug trafficker. He was a financial architect, and what he built over 40 years was not just a drug business. It was a money machine. One that generated billions of dollars and then made those billions disappear into the legal economy so completely that law enforcement still cannot find them. So let's follow the money, because this is where the story becomes genuinely surprising. Imagine you run a business that generates $100 million in cash every month. Not digital transfers, not wire payments. Actual physical cash, delivered by couriers, stacked in warehouses, moved across borders. That is the cartel's first problem. Not the drugs, the money. A kilogram of cocaine worth about $30,000 at the wholesale level in Mexico becomes around $80,000 on American streets. The cartel does not accept credit cards. It does not invoice its customers. It collects cash, and that cash has to go somewhere. It has to become something clean, something that can be deposited in a bank, invested in a property, used to pay employees and suppliers without triggering the suspicion of every financial institution and law enforcement agency in the world. That process is called money laundering, and the Sinaloa Cartel under El Mayo turned it into an industrial operation. The first method is the one most people know about: cash businesses. You buy a restaurant, a car wash, a laundromat, a construction company. Your illegal cash gets mixed in with the legitimate daily revenue. Suddenly, your drug money is the income from a perfectly normal business with employees, invoices, and tax records.
Don't you get it? On the outside, it's a nail salon, right? On the inside, it's the best money laundry a growing boy could ask for.
Internal records obtained by Mexican journalists showed the cartel operated shell companies in construction, scaffolding bars, and indoor soccer fields specifically for this purpose. But cash businesses have a limit. You can only run so many car washes before the numbers stop making sense. $15 billion is not a problem you can solve with restaurants. So the cartel built something more sophisticated. It is called trade-based money laundering, and it is the method that made the Sinaloa Cartel almost impossible to stop financially. Here is how it works in simple terms. Imagine a clothing company in Mexico that imports garments from suppliers in the United States. The cartel owns both sides of the transaction. The American supplier sends goods worth $100,000 to Mexico, but the invoice says $1 million. The Mexican company pays $1 million for goods worth $100,000. The extra $900,000 is drug money. That just became a legitimate business payment. Crossed the border legally. Documented on both sides. Almost impossible to trace. In 2014, a single law enforcement operation in the Los Angeles Fashion District involved 1,000 officers executing 75 arrest warrants simultaneously. The cartel had been using the garment industry to launder drug money by exploiting the cash-heavy nature of the trade where reporting requirements were routinely ignored. But even trade-based laundering has limits. At some point, the sheer volume of money requires something bigger, something global. And this is where the story takes a turn that almost nobody expected, because in recent years, the Sinaloa Cartel found a new partner: Chinese underground banking networks. Here is how this works. The Chinese government restricts how much money Chinese citizens can move out of the country. The limit is $50,000 per year, per person. But there are many wealthy Chinese nationals who want to move much more than that. They need a workaround. And the Sinaloa Cartel had exactly what they needed: American cash. The system works like this. A wealthy Chinese national wants to move $500,000 to the United States. They contact a broker in California. That broker arranges for a cartel representative in the U.S. to deliver $500,000 in drug cash to the Chinese national's representative in America. At the same time, the Chinese national transfers the equivalent amount in Chinese yuan to a manufacturer in China. That manufacturer then ships goods, electronics, clothing directly to Mexico. The cartel sells the goods, gets its money back in pesos, clean. In June 2024, the U.S. Department of Justice announced charges against 24 defendants in Los Angeles for laundering over $50 million in Sinaloa Cartel drug proceeds through exactly this system.
The U.S. Treasury official tells NBC News that Chinese criminal organizations are operating in the U.S. and now working with Mexican cartels by helping them launder money made from meth, fentanyl, and other drugs. They do so by loaning out the cartel's dollars to unsuspecting Chinese people living in America. These criminal organizations are then repaid in Chinese currency back in China. And the money launderers buy Chinese products and have them shipped to Mexico, where they're sold and give that money in pesos back to the cartels.
They use Chinese underground banking networks, structured cash deposits just small enough to avoid triggering financial reporting requirements, and cryptocurrency purchases to conceal the origin of the funds. And here is the detail that should stop you completely. The same Chinese manufacturers that received payments through this system were also shipping fentanyl precursor chemicals back to Mexico. The same network, the same brokers, the same transactions, running in two directions at once, money going one way. The chemicals needed to manufacture fentanyl coming back the other way. The system that laundered the drug profits was the exact same system that supplied the ingredients to make the next batch of drugs. The laundering network and the drug supply chain were not two separate operations. They were one system doing two jobs simultaneously. And there is the crypto dimension, because the newest evolution of cartel money laundering looks less like a warehouse full of cash and more like a laptop and a crypto wallet. Cartel affiliates in the US collect bulk cash from drug sales and convert it into cryptocurrency. Chinese broker networks then move the funds internationally using digital currency as the bridge, faster than wire transfers, harder to trace than cash. In 2024 alone, a single indictment in Texas referenced a network that processed more than $28 million in drug trafficking proceeds for the Sinaloa Cartel, using Chinese money laundering networks operating across suburban Atlanta and Los Angeles. So now you understand the machine, cash businesses, trade-based laundering, underground banking, cryptocurrency, layer after layer after layer. Each step puts more distance between a bag of drug cash in Chicago and a clean bank account somewhere in the world. Each step was documented, each step had a paper trail. But the paper trail pointed to a legitimate business, not a cartel. El Mayo spent 40 years building that system. He did not just traffic drugs. He built a parallel financial system designed specifically to absorb billions of dollars and make them vanish into the legal economy without a trace. And this is why the government cannot find the $15 billion, because by the time that money traveled through even one or two of these systems, it stopped looking like drug money. It became a restaurant's revenue, a garment importer's trade payment, a cryptocurrency transaction between two anonymous wallets, a Chinese manufacturer's export invoice, and now here is where things stand today. The $15 billion forfeiture judgment is not just a number on a piece of paper. It is a legal weapon. Every property, every company, every cryptocurrency wallet, every bank account that investigators can connect to El Mayo or the Sinaloa Cartel is now legally claimable by the US government. The hunt does not end with the sentencing. In many ways, it is just beginning. Investigators can now go anywhere in the world and say, we have a federal court order. We know this asset belongs to the cartel. Hand it over. That process will take years, maybe decades. And it will depend entirely on whether foreign governments cooperate, and whether the trails left behind are traceable at all. According to the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime, global drug trafficking generates somewhere between $400 billion and $500 billion per year. The financial systems built to launder that money are not small hidden operations in back rooms. They are woven into the fabric of the global economy, into real estate markets, into trade finance, into banks that process millions of transactions per day. The International Monetary Fund estimates that money laundering represents between 2 and 5% of global GDP every single year. Mexico's President Claudia Sheinbaum, after the sentencing this week, publicly asked the United States to share whatever it recovers from the $15 billion judgment with Mexico's poor communities, the people most devastated by 40 years of cartel violence. The government has not responded because there is almost nothing to share yet. The judgment exists, the money does not. El Mayo is in a federal prison cell. The $15 billion is somewhere in the world economy, in a property, in a company, in a cryptocurrency wallet, in an invoice from a garment factory, indistinguishable from the legitimate commerce moving around it every single day. He spent 40 years making sure of that. And for now, at least, it worked. So I want to hear from you. Do you think the government will ever actually recover that $15 billion? Or did El Mayo build a system good enough to outlast even a life sentence? Let me know in the comments. And if this breakdown was useful, like the video, subscribe, and turn on notifications. We are going to keep following the money. I will see you in the next one.